4th edition of the Nahar Jeeto Bookathon presented in association with the Rice Uni Foundation. In this session, we will explore the book In Service of the Republic by Vijay Kelkar and Ajay Shah, which examines India's economic journey, highlighting its substantial growth from 1921 to 2011 and the subsequent slowdown. The authors, both seasoned economists and former civil servants, delve into the reasons behind this retreat and purpose solutions to avoid the middle income trap. This insightful book combines economics, political philosophy, and public administration, offering a comprehensive guide to effective policy making for India's future prosperity. Our speaker of the session is Mr. Ajay Shah. He studied at IIT Bombay and USC Los Angeles. He has held position at Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, CMIE, Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research, IGIDR, Department of Economic Affairs at the Ministry of Finance and National Institute for Public Finance and Policy. He is now co-founder at XKDR Forum. His research is at the intersection of economics, law, and public administration. His second book, co-authored with Vijay Kelkar, In Service of the Republic, The Art and Science of Economic Policy, featured in Bloomberg's Global 2020 Best Books on Business and Leadership. Now, I'd like to hand over the session to our speaker.
I'm happy to be part of the Nahar Jeeto Bookathon, and I'm going to do a book talk about In Service of the Republic by Vijay Kelkar and me. We built this book from 2017 to 2019, which was the first edition, and then from 2019 to 2022, which was the second edition. And lo and behold, only now I feel ready to do a book talk and tell you the story of the book. So do look at the talk. I will tell a story about the book. I'll talk about what is the concept of this book and the place that it occupies in the intellectual landscape. I'll give you a high-speed tour of the book, and I'll give you some learning suggestions. Welcome, gentle reader, and today I'm going to talk about the book In Service of the Republic, The Art and Science of Economic Policy by Vijay Kelkar and me. Okay. This is a book that has actually been around for some time, but in some ways only now I feel clear on all the things that happened and the place of this book and the best strategy through which you can use the book. Okay, so in my talk today, I'm going to do 4 things. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story about how this book happened. Then I'm going to walk through the ideas of what is this book trying to do. It is trying to shoot at many different targets all at once, and they each are a different point of view, and each of you may choose to take interest in one of those lines of thought more than others. Then we'll go through the table of contents of the book, and I'll just introduce you to what are the parts of the book, what are the 45 chapters of the book, and 1 or 2 slides of some big ideas from the book. So to just give you a taste of the book and a high level sense of what this is doing. And finally, by now we have a lot of experience on how various people have engaged with the book, so I'm able to give you some thoughts on how best to use the book. Okay, so let's get started at the story. Most people would know about Vijay Kelkar. Dr. Kelkar is one of the great economists of India. He is a master in the field. He has exercised intellectual leadership and written original research products on India, and he's been a great part of the Indian public policy process. He was Petroleum Secretary for 6 years, where he saw through a large journey of the reforms of the petroleum sector, going from a complete PSU sector to an area where many kinds of things were being done in the private sector. Then he was finance secretary in the late 1990s, and he was chairman of the Finance Commission. So he's been in the Indian public policy system for a very long time. So he combines this intellectual depth of being an economist and researcher, and also the real world of having been at the top of the game in terms of doing practical things in India and economic policy. I moved back to India in 1993, and I've been connected into the world of public policy ever since. So I also have some knowledge and experience. I worked in the Ministry of Finance 2001 to 2005. From 2007 to 2017 for a 10-year period. I was leading the macro and finance group at NIPFP jointly with Ila Patnaik, and we were advising the Department of Economic Affairs on the fundamental reforms of Indian macroeconomics and finance. Kelkar and I started talking in 1998. We met at a conference in Sri Lanka, and we started working together closely from 2003 when Kelkar came back into the Ministry of Finance from his perch in the IMF, and we've been working together ever since. And my rough number is that we do about 100 hours of debate per year. And our interest is the great Indian development story. We are interested in India's development. We are interested in India's growth journey. And we have endlessly argued with each other about what is the theory, what are the concepts, what are the principles, and what could be done in terms of public policy to actually address what we felt are the choke points which are holding things back. So all through these years, from the early 2000s onwards, we have run this discourse between each other of trying to have a sense of what's going on in India, what's working, what's not working, what can public policy do. We've been part of innumerable policy battles, some successes, many failures, and we've had the opportunity to post-mortem and analyze and felt regret about many things that did not quite work out correctly. And that, I think, is a very important part of learning, that not a simple triumphalism about some things that went right, but the sense of distance through which one can think about mistakes and what went wrong as well. So drawing on all this, the event that triggered off the book was that Kelkar got invited to do the C.D. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture at NCER, and lots of people loved that lecture, and so Kelkar said to me, we should work and build this out into a book. And at first I was a little lukewarm, and I said, yeah, okay, let's do a book. And it felt like a chore, but I can never say no to Kelkar. So we got started, but halfway inside, I got really excited about the project, and I was in it with heart and soul. We got through to a publication deadline of release in 2019. So it was about 2 years of a journey to get to the book. But after the first edition was released, we just couldn't get it out of our heads, and we were just buzzing with ideas. Also, the first edition seems to have really worked. It struck a nerve, and between him and me, we got about 100 invitations to do talks, to do book talks, to do big ideas talks all over the country about what is going on in the country and about the book. And in a lot of those talks, we got to think more about what was the argument and how do people relate to it and how do people disagree and how we should be changing our story to better reflect this moment in India's history. So we were very lucky that Penguin agreed to build out into the paperback edition, and that became a second edition, a revised and updated second edition, and that came out in 2022. So I'm just going to go back to the title slide of this show, and you see This is the title of the second edition paperback, where at the top it says revised and updated. Okay, so if you don't see the revised and updated, or if it is the hardback, then it's the first edition, and we recommend that you should be using the second edition. It is significantly modified compared to the first edition. It is 2 more years of work on editing the file and making it stronger. In this, right from the outset, the dream was that it's a book of principles and not a book of sectors. So Kelkar and I have been part of innumerable India public policy book projects. Okay, so roughly every year there are 1 or 2 India public policy projects. There'll be a conference, there'll be a group of papers, and you put that together. And so the standard recipe for an India public policy book is to have a chapter on public finance, a chapter on education, a chapter on health, a chapter on finance, a chapter on monetary policy, a chapter on the police, a chapter on the legal system. So India public policy book is seen as a collection of sector chapters, and each sector chapter is written by one person who is an expert in that field and cares deeply about that field and writes a sense of the state of play, of what's going on, what's working, what's not working, and what is the way forward. Okay, and these are great. As I said, we have been part of n number of these projects for all our life. But the concept of this book was that we felt there is a deeper set of principles, a general toolkit, a grand unified theory that can actually be applied into all sectors, and that is the common understanding of why there has been so much failure in India, about why is India a poor country. It's ultimately the development economics question. Why is India a poor country is the most important question of all, and that takes us to failure in field after field after field, that there is a deep connection between the sources of failure in finance and the sources of failure in the legal system and sources of failure in public finance and so on. And a lot of conventional development economics has just missed the deeper reasoning and understanding about why India is an underdeveloped country, and we felt that we have a lot of value add in going after this grand unified theory, this general toolkit. And that has some very good implications and consequences. The general toolkit is useful for all sectors. Like, you may care about tiger conservation, but out of this book you will get a general toolkit that you can apply to tiger conservation. Okay? So it's a toolkit that can help everybody working in one field or the other, because otherwise when you read the standard India public policy book, there is a chapter on finance, there is a chapter on public finance, there is a chapter on the legal system, there is a chapter on the police, but there is no chapter on tiger conservation. And so what you're getting is a toolkit where you can apply first principles. You can develop a sophisticated line of thought, and very often a novel and original line of attack on how to think about your field. So whatever it is that you care about, we are offering a general toolkit using which we can obtain insight into all the sectors. Further, this book creates the opportunity for interdisciplinary conversations. So actually, no field stands alone. All fields lean on each other. Knowledge of everything is connected to everything. And the silos of Indian public policy have actually been an impediment. That the person doing defense policy in India actually desperately needs knowledge on public procurement, needs knowledge on HR, needs knowledge on pension reforms. But those conversations don't happen because the top pension experts of India are not talking to the top defense experts of India. And we think that it is important to help foster those conversations. And for that, what you require is a shared intellectual toolkit and a vocabulary that will enable these interdisciplinary conversations, so that each field does not just become an intricate history of that field and some arcane terminology of the field that is often impenetrable to persons coming from outside, and then really a within field political economy of why is there a big stuck in that field. Instead, it is possible to apply a general toolkit and obtain novel insights in field after field, and to be able to join hands and bring together expertise from the adjacent problems, where all across India there are actually many kinds of expertise that can be brought to the table. So that's a very important concept of this book, that there are many India public policy books which are one chapter per sector. This is not that. This is a general technology. This is a general toolkit. So with this background, I want to now come at what is this book trying to do, and I want to say it in 5 different ways. So at the simplest, it's an introductory book which takes you to the field of public policy, which is a blend of economics, of law, of public administration, and of growth theory. Okay, so growth theory development is actually the heart of this journey. Why is India poor is the most important question that all of us should worry about. And the toolkit for understanding this and solving problems lies in economics, in law, and in public administration. The economists have built a fabulous field that is called public economics, which gives us the engine on how to analyze these problems. And it requires this kind of interdisciplinary conversation where you need to bring all these pieces together. We need to fuse growth theory and public administration and law and public economics, and then we are able to analyze problems and add value to solving problems. And this is where, again, I want to emphasize that a lot of public policy happens in a vacuum without the inputs of economics. But actually, economics is a great field and has a lot to say. So public economics is an incredibly powerful toolkit. Growth theory done right is an incredibly powerful toolkit, and this adds a lot of value to the law and the public administration. So to the folks who are doing law, public administration, the practical din and battle of actually doing public policy in India, we bring the intellectual power of 200 years of economics to bear on this question, and we feel we add value. But equally, we think upside down, that economics in India has huge problems. A lot of the development stuff has really taken people off into the wrong direction, and we need to bring economics back to its foundations of thinking about India's growth and development, to refocus Indian economics upon the toolkit of public policy, to bring a correct focus on growth theory, and to link economics to law and public administration. So the idea that you can do economics as some arcane papers on health and education is really a chimera, and we would like to bring the big Indian story back to Indian economics, where Indian economics has really often not been able to see the full picture and be able to understand what is going on in India and be able to participate and contribute into the Indian journey. The third thing that's happening in this book is that there are completely novel chapters and there is novel synthesis. So, all books of ideas are a novel synthesis, as they should be if they're not going to be journalism. But there is novel synthesis and there are many novel chapters. So there are many chapters in this book that are completely new, that could readily have been original research papers coming out in the research literature, but they've come together in this edifice, and in the cathedral of this book they actually fit together nicely and they're better comprehended in this context. The fourth motivating idea that I feel should be uppermost in the mind for all of us is, why did India get a tremendous growth episode from 1991 to 2011? Okay, something singular happened in India from 1991 to 2011. So I think the great question of the age is, in obtaining a theory, why did India obtain growth for 1991 to 2011? And why did growth not happen that well in the following period? There is no question in India today that is more important than this one. And this book is our offering towards understanding this question. And nothing could be more important than that for all of us in the Indian journey, in the next 100 years of the Indian development project of how to get back to high growth. And that brings me to the last concept of this book, that finally this is a theory of growth and development, that we need to understand why countries are poor. Why is the Indian per capita GDP 1/10 that of the United States on a PPP basis? And so what goes wrong? Why does poverty arise? Why is there state failure? What is the Indian state doing wrong? And what can the Indian state do so as to be able to help and support this next 100-year journey for India to become an advanced economy? Okay, so now let's take a high-speed walk through the table of contents of this book. So I'm just going to give you a high-level introduction to this book. There's a preface, which is a bit of what I've already done, which is a motivational statement of why was this book done and what is the objective of this book. Then the book is organized as 7 parts. There is a foundations, which is a toolkit, a certain amount of public economics and economics. Then part 2 is what went wrong in India. Why did the Indian growth journey not work? Why is India a poor country? Then we come to the science and the art. Part 3 is the science. We think of the science as a set of building blocks where really there is not much ambiguity. We know this stuff. We are sure about this stuff. That if you will give me X hours of your life, I will be able to persuade you that we've got this cold. There is not a whole lot of debate and uncertainty about how these things work. So we give you like a high-level, comprehensible treatment of these chapters. But if you will go work harder and, gain extreme mastery in these fields, you'll pretty much see that this is correct. Like there's no great controversy around any of the things that are in the science. And then there is the art, where there are chapters which are more circumspect, where there are views, there are opinions, there are open debates, where you have to form your own mind, that there is no one answer and there is a great deal of judgment, there is a great deal of sophistication, where really as you see situations, you will have to form a sense of judgment, of emphasis. So for example, India is deeply diverse, and how you solve problems in Tamil Nadu will differ from how you solve problems in Rajasthan, and that is where the material in the art is about forming judgments. We think we'll add value by asking questions, and very often there is no one answer and there is a zone of judgment, of emphasis. Then we come to part 5, which is the public policy process, which is how the machine of public policy works and the kind of activities that happen inside the public policy process. So that is the main engine of the book. Foundations, a set of claims about what is going wrong in India, a bunch of chapters of science, which is clear, a bunch of chapters of the art, which is more subject to debate, and then a sense of the machinery of how public policy actually happens. Then we make a bunch of chapters which are examples of applying this toolkit to one sector after another, which gives you a bit of like sectoral chapters, but it's intended more as a demo, that here you see I can take this toolkit, apply it to a sector, and we produce novel, powerful insights. In sector after sector, we do new things compared to what a lot of mainstream normal Indian thinking is about the subject. So we prove to you over and over that this is a cool toolkit using which you can derive original knowledge and create value added in field after field after field in India. And then finally, we offer some words of skepticism, words of wisdom. Okay, so let me go a little more into these chapters. Once again, in the sense of this high level whistle stop tour of the book, it starts at a preface. Then there is foundations. In foundations, there are 3 chapters. The purpose of government. Why do you have government? You need a conceptual understanding of why we have government. Government is not an NGO. Government is not some good guy. There is a reason why there is government in the world. And then right away you need to understand what is the toolkit of intervention. Many people have a confused notion that government can do almost anything, and that is not correct. Government is a finite list of tools, and we have to understand what is the list of those tools. And then that hesitation, that skepticism, that government is a field where there is failure upon failure. Most purposive government activity in world history has led to failure. So we need to understand that we are dealing with a difficult problem where there is a large amount of failure, and go in with a suitable sense of humility and skepticism. Then we come to the Indian experience, understanding what went wrong in India and why do so many things go wrong in India, which is a bit of this anatomy of a poor country. What is wrong in a poor country and why did so many things go wrong? Why has India failed? Why has the Indian development project failed? Why is India poor? Why is the Indian per capita GDP 1/10 of that of the United States measured in PPP terms? Then we come to the science, where there is chapter 6 through chapter 15. You see the names on the screen. I'm not going to go through each of them, but as I said, each of these are very clear, well-established ideas where we have no doubt that this stuff is understood. Chapter 6, people respond to incentives. This sort of is the t-shirt of economics, and you need to think deeply about incentives. Chapter 12, private solutions for market failure. There's a whole bunch of situations where the private sector can do these things well. Chapter 15, taking decentralization seriously. Okay, so I don't want to dwell on each of these chapters, but chapter 6 through chapter 15 is where really there is not much controversy. This stuff is understood, and we hope the chapter will persuade you. But you're welcome to be skeptical. Go spend 1 year studying each of these chapters. You will come out with basically these answers. So we're very confident that we are correct. But then you come to the art. Okay, chapter 16 to chapter 28. This is more troublesome territory. In all these things, we offer ideas, we have views, we have beliefs. We certainly think we're asking the right questions, but there is no one answer. You should debate, you should be skeptical, you should make up your own mind. Here we think we are asking the important questions. We're certainly bubbling up questions that we think are at core to the Indian journey, and we have our own concerns and skepticism that we think we know a lot. Maybe we don't, maybe we are wrong. Okay, you should think, you should make up your mind. I want to draw attention to chapters 27 and 28, which are about the information technology revolution. Sometimes there is a lot of optimism that you could leapfrog through the development journey by using computers. That can computer technology make a material difference to the Indian development journey? And by and large, we're not too optimistic about it. We're a little bit optimistic about what can be done, and we certainly disagree with any claims that computer engineering somehow magically solves the Indian development problem. That's chapter 27. That is there a digital pathway to state capacity? To what extent do big computer systems hold the answer? In what ways can they genuinely help? And in what ways is this a bit of a sideshow to the main Indian development journey? And then in chapter 28, we go after a more dark picture, that is there a premature state power that goes along with the digital age, where actually there are threats and dangers in the computer revolution, and we need to be cautious and skeptical about integrating the computer revolution into the conventional ways of Indian underdevelopment. That at India's stage of underdevelopment, the embracing of the computer revolution by the Indian state gives the Indian state high levels of power, which are actually dangerous, a bit in the sense of the narrow corridor idea of Acemoglu and Robinson. Okay, then we come to the public policy process. This is chapter 29 to chapter 38, which is about the machinery of doing it. And we feel these are often novel and interesting chapters that will help a practitioner think about the life of actually doing public policy, and what you do and what you don't do, and warning about the pitfalls and helping people think about where things go wrong. And then we take this toolkit in part 6 and apply it to a bunch of areas. So in chapter 39, we take the problem of decarbonization, that every country has to go to net zero carbon emissions. How will you think about that field using the toolkit of this book? Chapter 40, GST. Okay, so Vijay Kelkar, Arvind Modi and I played a certain leadership role in the invention of the GST in India. And this is our thought process on a first principles reasoning on how you get to the design of a GST for India. And the chapter is very short, but you will see that it is quite different from the kind of GST that has actually come up around us. Then in chapter 41, we apply this first principles toolkit to the field of health, and you will see it is fresh and original and novel and very different from what many people in India think about the field of health. In chapter 42, we apply this toolkit to COVID vaccines. Okay, so what we're showing you is field after field. Chapter 43 is finance. In field after field after field, we are showing a first principles technology that you land in a field. Here is the toolkit of chapter 1 to chapter 38. How would you apply it? How do you derive novel insights and a whole internally consistent paradigm and a framework of how to think about that field? So we're showing these 5 not because we think COVID vaccines are that important or because finance is very, very important, but more as a demo to you about how the toolkit can be applied, and then it can be applied to everything. And that gives you an engine on how to think about the world. So we are not that concerned on your sharing our worldview about how to do health policy, though chapter 41 is very cool. It's a novel batch of insights about health in India. But far more important, we'd like to show you how to think and how to apply this toolkit to the world and derive novel insights in field after field after field of whatever it is that you are doing. So that is the dream of this book, and that is where part 6 is more a demo of how to play the framework of chapter 1 to chapter 38 rather than a book of chapters about one sector at a time, which is the normal Indian public policy book. Finally, we come to part 7, which is reimagining the Indian development project, which sort of uses all our shared conversation from chapter 1 to chapter 43 to think deeply about where we have come in the Indian development journey, what is working, what is not working, why did 1991 to 2011 happen, why did 1991 to 2011 peter out, and what all of us should be doing to get the Indian development journey back on track. So just to show you the 7 parts of the book, once again, please glance at these part titles and you get a sense of the skeleton of this book. Okay, I want to briefly talk about some of these ideas. Again, just giving you a flavor of this book. So we feel very strongly about the 1991 to 2011 growth episode. And we think the great question of the age is, why did India grow well for 1991 to 2011, but not thereafter? And some of our key ideas are that there is a serious central planning problem and a rule of law problem. That at heart, the Indian journey has petered out because there is way too much central planning. The government interferes in the life of the private sector too much and too little rule of law. The private sector faces a personalized, unpredictable and capricious state. And then that creates risk for private persons. There is the risk that policy can change. There is the risk that the coercive power of the state will be used against the private person under question. And that creates a risk of expropriation. And in the face of these risks, the private sector has retreated and said, very nice, but we are not keen on investing in the country. And if you share this diagnosis, then we offer the details of how changes in formal laws and changes in public administration can pull back from the central planning and pull back from the personalized state and create a rule of law environment imbued with constitutionalism so that there can be confidence by the private sector, and then the private sector will put their children and their capital and their emotional energy and their passion back into working in India, building organizations in India, helping to grow the knowledge and the communities and the business ecosystem through which we can get back to sustained growth. We find it a great organizing principle to think that there have been three paradigms of Indian policy thinking. Mark 1 is the first paradigm of how we went about public policy in India. This was built by the INC community in the period from 1920 to 1947. Okay, so this is well before the British left India. The high intellectualism of the INC community involved great debates. Okay, so you would have seen the letters written in that age. This was before email. There's a beautiful book, The Mahatma and the Poet, which are letters between Gandhiji and Tagore. Okay, so the great people of that age, Nehru, Rajgopalachari, they debated with each other about what would be the nature of an India once the British left. So a intellectual framework was built 1920 to 1947. It was implemented from 1947 onwards, and it had some impacts upon the country which were very beneficial from 1950 to 1962. Okay, so after 1962 there was just a terrible set of years. There was the China War in 1962. There were two consecutive droughts. There was the disasters of bank nationalization and the socialism and the populism and the authoritarianism of the Indira Gandhi years leading up to the emergency. So that was just this terrible period from 1962 to 1977, when it felt like the entire Indian growth story had collapsed into populism, socialism, and authoritarianism. Then you get to Mark II. Okay, Mark II is the second batch of knowledge and strategy about how we are going to do the Indian development project. And this was led by Arun Shuri, Manmohan Singh, Jagdish Bhagwati, T.N. Srinivasan, okay, Montek Ahluwalia, Vijay Kelkar, Ashok Desai, and so on. A whole bunch of people dreamed and thought and analyzed. Once again, a very intellectual journey of books, of papers, of debate. The ideas come first, the intellectuals come first. It is the ideas that need to shift, and we need to develop a new conceptual framework of how are we going to think about what has gone wrong in this country and do it differently. The incubation, the development of the ideas runs roughly 1960 to 1991. Okay. Its implementation began in 1977 when the Janata Party came to power, when Morarji Desai was the Prime Minister, when H.M. Patel was the Finance Minister, when D.T. Lakdawala headed the Planning Commission, and a whole new wave of more free market and freedom-oriented economists started coming into the Ministry of Finance and the Planning Commission. Okay, so this started getting turned into practice from 1977, and it had a first wave of impact from 1979 onwards, and it blossomed fully into a bigger impact for 1991 to 2011. So contrary to how some people have argued, we think that this is one single picture of the Mark II. That Mark II of Indian reasoning was an intellectual debate from 1960 to 1991. It started getting implemented in 77. It got partly done there, and it generated an impact from 79 onwards, and it blossomed and generated the fuller impact 1991 to 2011. Okay, and now the great question of the age is Mark III. Okay, what is our journey going forward? So we know Mark II has run its course, and in fact from 2011 onwards many things have gone wrong, and we tell a story around too much central planning and too little rule of law. That's the concepts of Mark III. And from 2012 onwards, there is a remarkable new intellectual community in India that has been deciphering this, has been analyzing what went wrong in India, building a literature, an amazing body of knowledge, a lot of which you will see in the end notes of this book. It's a raw material out of which this book has come. And in future years, as these ideas start getting implemented, we think it will put the Indian development story back on track. Finally, we want to give you some thoughts on how to use this book. Again, we have talked with many people who have engaged with this book in radical and fascinated and interesting ways. So each chapter is roughly 2x the size of a newspaper opinion piece. So it's not a book of big complicated chapters. It's not a academic style tome. It is written as self-contained short chapters. So you should think of each chapter as about 2x the size of a newspaper opinion piece. And we suggest you should commit about 90 minutes to study each chapter. You should spend 20 minutes reading the chapter once. You will get the big idea. And it's that short. It's 20 minutes to read the chapter once. Then you should spend 20 minutes and read the chapter again, and now go into the detail. There are many, many examples which are shown separately, and you should get the depth of the chapter in going into the examples. Then the third time you should spend 20 minutes and you should read the chapter, but you should link it to the end notes. So at the end of the book, there are the end notes of the book, and each of these end notes is a reading list where there are detailed materials on each chapter, and you should just become aware of that research literature, and you should choose a few things that you will follow up on in the future. Finally, you should spend half an hour debating these issues in a reading group. So pick your friends, pick your intellectual community, pick your fellow travelers. It's good to debate one chapter at a time, but try to make the ideas yours. Apply them into the world that you know. Apply them into practical stories and situations and experience that you know, and that way it becomes your toolkit, and you develop the ability to reason using the ideas and the vocabulary of the chapter. So this is 90 minutes of work per chapter, and if you do about 4 hours a week for 17 weeks, you will get this full mastery, and it will give you a quantum leap in your ability to think about the country. There are many adjacent materials. So this book is a centerpiece of an entire body of knowledge that you will be able to go deeper in. At IIHS in Bangalore, they worked with Coursera to build a course, The Art and Science of Economic Policy, which has been done by thousands of people, and you may find that to be useful, and you can pay 1,000 rupees and you will get a certificate that you have done that course. Then Amit Verma and I have a weekly show on YouTube that is called Everything is Everything. We have more than 50 episodes done, and you will see each of those episodes fits into this intellectual framework, and it will help you to dive into one subject after another in a way that fits in this intellectual paradigm. Then there is a scientific publication which is called the Lib blog, where you will get a couple of articles every month, which is once again consistent in this paradigm, and you will get many new research materials coming out. In my organization, XKDR Forum, we have a large body of work. You will get that on the website, and maybe potentially you might be able to get access to important annual conference in India that is called the Emerging Markets Conference. It's not accessible to the public, but maybe you might be able to get some access to it. There are some new community activities in the pipeline. We are going to build a discussion mechanism through Discord. Just stay tuned and hunt it down and you will find it. And a great learning technique will be that in part 6, there is a bunch of examples of applying this toolkit into one field after another. So I strongly urge you, do this for your field of interest. So what is it that you are interested in? Try to write that paper where you think from first principles, apply the toolkit of the book, and build one knowledge product where you are applying this into your world, into your toolkit, and you're getting one document where you have made these ideas yours. So thank you for being with me through this book talk. On the screen there is the URL of my homepage. Please do look at it, and I hope to meet you soon.